The rivalry isn't ending. 90 miles of turnpike separates Philadelphia and New York. But you'd think it was 90 miles of barbed wire. This is the story of a rivalry so personal that when the Giants tried to mock Philadelphia's fight song while winning by 21 points, the Eagles came back to steal the game in the final seconds, where a linebacker celebrated over a Hall of Famer's unconscious body and never apologized, where a fumble that should never have happened became the only thing New York fans talk about when they're losing. The Eagles lead the all-time series 97-90, but those numbers mean nothing because this isn't about who's won more games. This is about the fumble, the hit, the miracle, about moments so brutal they became nouns. But how did two franchises 90 miles apart become mortal enemies? Before they could hate each other properly, one side had to establish dominance. October 15th, 1933, the Polo Grounds. The Philadelphia Eagles' first ever game against the New York Giants. The Eagles were a franchise literally born from the ashes. The Frankfurt Yellow Jackets had folded in 1931, and in 1933, a syndicate led by Bert Bell and Lud Ray paid an entry fee to create a new expansion team. They purchased the Yellow Jackets' territorial rights and physical assets for $2,500. The uniforms, equipment, but not the franchise charter or history. The NFL records treat them as two completely separate teams. Philadelphia scraped together enough money to put a team on the field, wearing the Yellow Jackets' leftover powder blue and yellow uniforms to save money. The Giants had been around since 1925. They'd already won a championship in 1927. They had history, pedigree, the kind of swagger that came with being New York royalty. And on that October afternoon, they made sure Philadelphia understood the hierarchy. Final score, Giants 56, Eagles 0. It wasn't a game, it was a public execution. It was New York telling Philadelphia exactly where they stood in the pecking order. The Giants had the talent, the championships, the big market money. Philadelphia had nothing but bruises and the long bus ride home. But here's what New York didn't understand about Philadelphia. Survival builds something championships can't: hunger. The Eagles spent the next year absorbing beatings, learning what it took to compete against teams that had everything they didn't. And in 1934, they finally got one back. 6-0, at home, in front of Philadelphia fans who worked the docks and the factories and saw themselves in this team that refused to quit. It was ugly. It was low scoring. It was theirs. The rivalry had drawn first blood on both sides. Through the late 1930s, the pattern crystallized. The Giants would dominate most matchups, carrying themselves with the confidence of a franchise that expected to win. When they took the field, it wasn't a question of if they'd beat Philadelphia. It was a question of by how much. And that arrogance, that entitlement, it drove Philadelphia fans absolutely insane. Because across the state line, New York's fan base carried themselves differently. They'd seen championships. They tasted glory. They expected excellence and didn't apologize for it. Meanwhile, Philadelphia fans were watching their team get pummeled twice a year by a franchise that looked down on them. The blue-collar workers in Philadelphia weren't the glamour franchise. They were the fighters. And every time the Giants won, every time New York fans celebrated another beating, it fed something dark in Philadelphia, a resentment that would simmer for decades. But these early battles were just the warm-up. The 1940s brought a shift in power. Philadelphia was building something real now. They had Steve Van Buren, one of the first true superstar running backs in NFL history. They had an identity, blue-collar toughness that refused to quit. And they were ready to send a message to the team that had humiliated them 56-0 15 years earlier. October 10th, 1948, Shibe Park. The Eagles were winless, heading into their third game of the season. They were supposed to be easy prey. Not anymore. Final score, Eagles 45, Giants 0. It wasn't just a win, it was a statement. It was revenge served cold. Philadelphia forced turnovers, held New York to just 125 yards of offense, and made sure everyone in the league knew this franchise wasn't anybody's doormat anymore. The message was clear. Philadelphia had arrived. But here's the thing about this rivalry. One beating was never enough. The Eagles wanted more. 4 weeks later, on November 7th, the teams met again, this time at the Polo Grounds in New York, the Giants' home field, in front of New York's fans. This was supposed to be where the Giants got revenge, where they restored the natural order. Final score, Eagles 35, Giants 14. Philadelphia didn't just beat the Giants in 1948. They swept them. They dominated them. They embarrassed them twice in 5 weeks. And that complete annihilation started an undefeated run that would carry Philadelphia all the way to their first NFL championship. New York wouldn't forget. New York couldn't forget. Because that's the rhythm of this thing. One team lands a crushing blow and the other spends years plotting revenge. Neither city lets the other get comfortable. Neither fan base concedes an inch. The hatred compounds with every game, every decade, every generation. The 1950s ground on. The Eagles cycled through rebuilding. But even when neither team was dominant, the games still mattered. They still drew blood. They were still personal. And then two players emerged who would define what this rivalry actually meant. One was a New York icon, handsome, talented, everything Giants royalty was supposed to be. The other was a Philadelphia linebacker nicknamed Concrete Charlie, who played the game like it was a street fight. When they collided, the rivalry would get its first permanent scar. In 1956, the Giants won the NFL championship behind their offensive star, a running back named Frank Gifford. Gifford was everything New York royalty was supposed to be: handsome, talented, charming, the face of professional football. But he hadn't always been royalty. Gifford grew up in poverty so severe that, according to his wife Kathy Lee, he sometimes ate dog food to survive. His family lived in 29 different places before he even got to high school because his father couldn't find work during the Depression. He'd climbed out of that childhood to become a Hall of Famer, an NFL MVP, a champion, everything the Giants stood for, taking nothing and building it into gold. But Philadelphia had their own icon rising, a linebacker named Chuck Bednarik, Concrete Charlie. Bednarik wasn't pretty. He wasn't polished. He sold concrete in the offseason while Gifford courted the media. He was one of the last true two-way players in NFL history, playing center on offense and linebacker on defense. 60 minutes of football, every single game. Bednarik was violence incarnate, the physical embodiment of Philadelphia's identity, relentless, unforgiving, blue-collar toughness personified. While Gifford represented New York's glamour and success, Bednarik represented Philadelphia's rage. These two were on a collision course. November 20th, 1960, Yankee Stadium, the Giants' house. The Eagles were chasing their first championship in over a decade. This game would determine the Eastern Conference. Fourth quarter, Eagles leading 17-10. The Giants were driving, trying to tie the game and keep their season alive. They needed this. They had to have it. Gifford caught a pass over the middle. He secured the ball, turned upfield looking for yards, looking to extend the drive, looking to save New York's season. And that's when Bednarik arrived. The sound reached the upper deck. From the sideline, running back Billy Ray Barnes would later say it sounded like a .22 going off, just a tremendous crack. Bednarik blindsided Gifford with his shoulder, arriving like a freight train. It was a clean hit by the rules of the day, but delivered with every ounce of fury Philadelphia could muster. Gifford's head snapped back. The ball came loose. He didn't move. And then Bednarik did something that would define this rivalry forever. He stood over him, arms raised, celebrating. The image became iconic. The Philadelphia linebacker celebrating while the Giants' golden boy lay motionless on the turf. In New York's own stadium, in front of New York's fans, with New York's season dying on the field alongside their star. New York saw it as classless, disgusting, unforgivable. Everything wrong with Philadelphia football. Philadelphia saw it as catharsis, as justice, as exactly what the Giants deserved. Gifford was carried off on a stretcher. The concussion was severe. So severe, it would force him out of football for 18 months. His career hung in the balance. His life, for a few terrifying moments, seemed uncertain. But Bednarik never apologized. Not once, not ever. Years later, Gifford would be diplomatic about it. Chuck hit me exactly the way I would have hit him, with his shoulder, a clean shot. That's football. But when Bednarik was asked about the celebration, about standing over Gifford's motionless body with his arms raised, he showed no remorse. I was merely celebrating a play that won the game for Philadelphia. And when asked decades later if he ever got tired of talking about the hit, Bednarik's response was pure Philadelphia. Are you kidding? I never get tired of it. For Frank, it's probably a different story. The Eagles won 17-10 at Yankee Stadium in New York's house. The hit did something deeper than decide one football game. It crystallized what Eagles-Giants actually meant. This wasn't about respect or sportsmanship or clean competition. This was about inflicting pain, about dominance, about making sure the other side remembered what happened the last time they shared a field. New York fans never forgave Bednarik. They couldn't. Every time they saw that image, every time someone mentioned his name, it brought back the rage. Philadelphia fans made him a saint. They worshipped him. They wore that image on t-shirts like it was a religious icon. The divide was permanent. The hatred was generational. And both cities knew it was only getting worse. The 1960s and early 1970s brought a different kind of war. Both teams cycled through ups and downs, trading blowouts that proved neither side could ever relax. In 1964, the Eagles crushed the Giants 38-7. 2 years later, they beat them 31-3. The message was clear. Philadelphia could still dominate when they wanted to. But then came Thanksgiving weekend, 1972. Yankee Stadium. New York decided to send their own message. Final score, Giants 62, Eagles 10. 62 points. The worst beating Philadelphia had suffered in years. The Giants didn't just win, they humiliated. They ran up the score. They made sure Philadelphia felt every single point. That was the rhythm of this thing. One team would land a crushing blow, and the other would spend the next season or the next decade plotting revenge. Neither side let the other get comfortable. Neither fan base conceded an inch. The game still mattered even when the teams weren't good. They still drew blood. By 1978, both franchises were searching for identity again. The Giants, now playing in their new home at Giant Stadium, were trying to recapture past glory. Head coach John McVay was in his third season, but the team had been consistently finishing last in their division. They had talent. Veteran running back Larry Zonka had joined after his legendary Miami career, but they couldn't put it together. They were stuck at 5-6, mediocre and frustrated. Philadelphia, under head coach Dick Vermeil, was building something real. Vermeil had taken over a 4-10 team and was slowly transforming them into contenders. Quarterback Ron Jaworski, the Polish rifle, was leading an offense that was starting to believe in itself. At 7-4, the Eagles were becoming dangerous again. November 19th, 1978, Giants Stadium, Week 12. The game unfolded exactly as the Giants needed it to. They jumped out to a 14-0 lead in the first quarter. They controlled the game for 3.5 quarters, and with seconds remaining in the fourth, they were protecting a 17-12 lead. The Eagles had no timeouts. The clock was running. All the Giants had to do was take the snap and kneel. Victory formation, run out the clock, go home with a crucial division win. It was over. The Giants had won. Quarterback Joe Pisarcik lined up under center. The handoff call came in from the sideline. Offensive coordinator Bob Gibson insisted on running one more play instead of taking a knee. One more handoff to Larry Zonka. Keep the clock moving. Don't give Philadelphia any chance. Pisarcik objected. He wanted to kneel. The entire sideline wanted him to kneel. Everyone in the stadium knew what the smart play was, but the play call came in anyway. He took the snap, turned to hand the ball to Zonka. The exchange never happened. The ball hit Zonka's hip and bounced loose. It rolled across the turf like a grenade with the pin pulled. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Nobody believed what they were seeing. Eagles cornerback Herman Edwards was standing nearby. He saw the ball. He saw the chaos. He saw opportunity. He scooped it at the 26-yard line and had nothing but green grass ahead of him. 26 yards later, Philadelphia had stolen a game that was already over. Final score, Eagles 19, Giants 17. The Giants' season imploded in the span of 3 seconds. The Giants Stadium crowd sat in stunned silence. 50,000 people who had been celebrating 30 seconds earlier were now watching their season die in the most excruciating way imaginable. On the sideline, Coach John McVay looked like he'd witnessed a car accident. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. "That's the most horrifying ending to a ball game I've ever seen," he'd say afterward. The Giants fired offensive coordinator Bob Gibson the next morning. He walked into the facility and was told to clean out his desk. One play had ended his career. The play became a noun in New York, the fumble, something that didn't need explaining, something that still doesn't need explaining 46 years later. But for Philadelphia, it became something else entirely. Proof that New York could be broken, that their big market arrogance and their championship pedigree meant absolutely nothing when the ball came loose, that no lead was safe, that no game was over, that 90 miles away, Philadelphia was always waiting to make them pay for their mistakes. Edwards, who would later become famous for his coaching declaration, "You play to win the game," had just done exactly that. The miracle at the Meadowlands became folklore. It was replayed endlessly. It changed how NFL teams handled end-of-game situations. From that point forward, forward, taking a knee became standard procedure across the league. No more handoffs with seconds left. No more risks. The Giants' humiliation had rewritten the rulebook. But more than that, it tilted the psychological balance of the rivalry. New York had been embarrassed on their own field in front of their own fans in the most painful way possible. And Philadelphia fans never let them forget it. The hatred intensified. The games got uglier. The 1980s were about to make everything worse. The Giants, under new head coach Bill Parcells, starting in 1983, began building a defensive monster. Parcells was blunt, demanding, obsessed with toughness. He didn't care about style points or making friends. He cared about winning. And he'd transform a struggling franchise into champions within 3 years. His centerpiece was a linebacker from North Carolina who'd been described by his college coaches as reckless, just reckless. Lawrence Taylor changed everything. He revolutionized the linebacker position, turned defensive game planning on its head, and became the most feared player in football. As a freshman at North Carolina, coaches said he'd jump 6 or 7 feet in the air to block a punt, then land on the back of his neck. That was his approach to everything. Full speed, consequences be damned. Taylor won NFL MVP in 1986, Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, and helped the Giants win 2 Super Bowls. But in the context of this rivalry, he was something else entirely, a nightmare. Every time Philadelphia's quarterback dropped back to pass, Taylor was coming. Every time they tried to run, he was there. He was relentless, and he understood what these games meant. Meanwhile, Philadelphia was building their own defensive identity. In 1986, they hired Buddy Ryan as head coach. Ryan had just finished coordinating the Chicago Bears' legendary 46 defense, one of the greatest units in NFL history. That defense had been so dominant, so feared, that it had carried the Bears to a championship. The defensive players had been so loyal to Ryan that when the Bears' head coach was fired, they'd lobbied ownership to promote Ryan instead. Ryan brought that same aggressive philosophy to Philadelphia. He preached one thing above all else: destroy the quarterback. If you could take out the opposing QB, you could take out the entire offense. His defenses would lead the league in sacks, in chaos, in pure intimidation. And Ryan loved the rivalry. He loved the violence. He loved that these games felt like wars. The late 1980s became a collision of philosophies. Parcells' disciplined, championship-caliber Giants versus Ryan's aggressive, attack-everything Eagles. Both coaches despised losing to each other. Both understood what it meant to their fan bases. Both knew that beating the team 90 miles away mattered almost as much as winning championships. November 20th, 1988, Giants Stadium. 10 years after the original miracle at the Meadowlands. Both teams came in with identical 7-4 records. First place in the NFC East was on the line. The Giants were a year and a half removed from winning their first Super Bowl. Many of those championship players were still on the roster. They had Phil Simms at quarterback. They had Lawrence Taylor terrorizing offenses. They had Parcells' iron discipline. The Eagles had Randall Cunningham, the ultimate weapon, a quarterback who could make plays nobody else in the league could dream of making. They had Reggie White, the minister of defense, destroying offensive lines. They had Buddy Ryan's chaos defense, and they had revenge on their minds. The game was brutal, physical, everything you'd expect from Giants-Eagles. By the end of regulation, it was tied 17-17. The game went to overtime. In overtime, the Eagles drove into field goal range. This was it, the chance to win the division, to sweep the Giants, to prove they were the better team. Kicker Luis Zendejas lined up for a 31-yard attempt. Routine, automatic, game over. Lawrence Taylor had other plans. He exploded off the line and blocked the kick. The ball ricocheted backward, bouncing toward the line of scrimmage. For the second time in 10 years, a ball had come loose at Giants Stadium with everything on the line. But this time, it wasn't the Giants who fumbled. Eagles defensive end Clyde Simmons, who had been playing on the offensive line as an extra blocker for the kick attempt, saw the ball. He scooped it up and ran 15 yards into the end zone. Touchdown. Eagles win 23-17 in overtime. Chaos erupted. The Eagles bench stormed the field. Parcells ran into the end zone, screaming at the officials that Simmons shouldn't be allowed to advance a blocked kick. But referee Jerry Seaman explained, on 3rd down, you can advance a blocked kick. 4th down, you can't. This was 3rd down. The touchdown stood. Philadelphia had done it again at Giants Stadium. on the 10-year anniversary of the Fumble. They'd stolen another game in the most improbable way imaginable. Both teams finished the season 10-6, but because the Eagles had swept the season series, they won the NFC East. The Giants missed the playoffs entirely, losing the tiebreaker to the Los Angeles Rams. One blocked kick had decided the division. New York fans called it the forgotten miracle at the Meadowlands. They wanted to forget it. They needed to forget it. Philadelphia fans never let them. The rivalry wasn't just alive anymore. It was eating both cities from the inside out, and everyone knew, both sides knew, that it was only going to get worse. Phil Simms hated facing Buddy Ryan's defense. The Giants quarterback had been booed mercilessly by his own fans when he was drafted. They thought he was a reach, a mistake, a waste of a pick, but he'd silenced them by winning a Super Bowl and taking home MVP honors. He'd earned his place in New York football royalty, but twice a year, he had to face Philadelphia, and twice a year, Ryan's chaos defense made him miserable. Well, it was misery, Simms would say years later when asked about playing the Eagles. That's the kindest word I can say on TV. He had a unique defense, something that I've never seen in the NFL. You take something unique and then it has talent, that's how you get greatness. Ryan's Eagles had greatness, but they couldn't get past the playoffs. 3 times under Ryan, the Eagles made the postseason. 3 times, they lost. In 1988, they lost to the Chicago Bears in the famous Fog Bowl, a game so shrouded in mist that fans couldn't see the field. In 1989, they lost to the Los Angeles Rams in the wild card round. In 1990, they lost to Washington, 0-3. Ryan's aggressive philosophy could dominate in the regular season, but when the stakes got highest, the Eagles came up short. In Philadelphia's centerpiece, quarterback Randall Cunningham, the ultimate weapon, was running for his life. Cunningham had been drafted in 1985, and he was unlike anything the league had ever seen. He was the first black quarterback elected as a Pro Bowl starter. His scrambling ability was supernatural. He could make plays that defied physics, that made defensive coordinators tear up their game plans in frustration. But the Eagles' offensive line was porous. In 1986, they allowed Cunningham to be sacked a franchise record 72 times. 72 times he went down. 72 times he got back up. And somehow, he could still make plays that negated every yard lost. Giants linebacker Carl Banks faced Cunningham twice a year and called it torture. I don't think there was ever a quarterback who was harder to prepare for or gave defensive players individually more problems or more concerns before the game ever started, Banks said. He described one play where he had Cunningham dead to rights, a routine tackle, a guaranteed sack, and Cunningham somehow stretched his body like rubber, kept the play alive, and completed a touchdown pass anyway. It's one of the greatest plays I've ever been involved in, Banks admitted. I can honestly say that even though it went against us. But Cunningham's magic wasn't enough. In 1993, injuries and the team's transition to a West Coast offense led to him being benched in favor of veteran Rodney Peete. The frustration was mounting. The window was closing. Philadelphia could beat the Giants in the regular season, but they couldn't win when it mattered most. Meanwhile, across the turnpike, the Giants kept winning championships. After their 1986 title behind Parcells and Lawrence Taylor, they won again in 1990. Parcells eventually left, but the culture remained. The expectation of excellence remained. When Tom Coughlin arrived as head coach in 2004, he brought his own brand of obsessive discipline. Coughlin was notorious for moving facility clocks 5 to 15 minutes ahead to ensure players arrived early. He'd fine players for being just 2 minutes early to meetings, saying they should have been there 5 minutes early according to his adjusted clocks. His rules were exhausting. His demands were relentless. But even with all those championships, even with all that success, the Eagles' games still stung when the Giants lost. Because 90 miles away, Philadelphia fans never let them forget. Back in Philadelphia, the Eagles had found their own answer in 1999. They'd hired Andy Reid as head coach. Reid was an offensive innovator, a quarterback whisperer who transformed Philadelphia into perennial postseason contenders. Over his tenure, he'd led the Eagles to 9 playoff appearances, 6 division titles, 5 NFC championship games, and 1 Super Bowl appearance. The man could coach. But more importantly, he understood this rivalry. He knew what it meant. He knew that beating the Giants mattered almost as much as winning championships. Reid's centerpiece was quarterback Donovan McNabb, drafted 2nd overall in 1999. McNabb would become the Eagles' franchise leader in passing yards, touchdowns, attempts, and completions. A 6-time Pro Bowler who'd faced the Giants twice a year together for over a decade. Giants defensive end Michael Strahan, in the middle of a Hall of Fame career, loved the challenge. "I love playing against Donovan," Strahan said before one matchup, "because he's one of the toughest quarterbacks to play against. He can beat you both ways, on the ground and throwing the ball. It's a big challenge." But there was also frustration simmering beneath the surface. January 7th, 2001, Giants Stadium, NFC Divisional Playoffs. It started badly for Philadelphia. Return man Ron Dixon took the opening kickoff 97 yards to the house. The Giants Stadium crowd erupted. New York jumped ahead early. Then in the second quarter, Giants cornerback Jason Sehorn read Donovan McNabb's eyes, jumped the route to Torrance Small, and intercepted the pass. He didn't just catch it, he took it 32 yards the other way for a touchdown. New York led 17-0. The route was on. Final score, Giants 20, Eagles 10. It was New York's 9th consecutive victory over Philadelphia. 9 straight wins. The Giants owned this rivalry, and they knew it. Running back Tiki Barber, who just signed a 6-year extension, declared himself the happiest man in New York right now. The Giants went on to beat Minnesota in the NFC Championship, then lost to Baltimore 34-7 in the Super Bowl. But they'd made their point. When the playoffs arrived, Philadelphia crumbled, and that pattern kept repeating. Andy Reid was building something special in Philadelphia. He had a franchise quarterback in McNabb. He had Brian Dawkins, nicknamed Weapon X, patrolling the secondary with the kind of violent intensity that made offensive coordinators lose sleep. Dawkins was a 9-time Pro Bowler who played every snap like it was his last, crawling on all fours before games to release the rage he'd built up inside. The spirit of Reggie White, the Minister of Defense, who'd retired after the 2000 season, still hung over the Philadelphia defense. White had been the Eagles' all-time sack leader, a force of nature who destroyed offensive lines and quarterbacks with equal measure. His legacy wasn't just the 124 sacks he recorded in 8 seasons. It was the mentality, the expectation that Philadelphia's defense would dominate. Reid's Eagles made the playoffs year after year. They reached the NFC Championship game 4 straight years from 2001 to 2004. In 2004, they finally broke through and made it to the Super Bowl. They lost to New England, 24-21. So close, so painfully close, and still no championship. In 2002, Philadelphia signed offensive tackle John Runyon. The rumor was that they'd signed him specifically to neutralize Strahan, to take away the Giants' best pass rusher. Years later, Strahan admitted it bothered him. "I was told that they signed him to stop me," Strahan said, "and it bothered me. Somebody could have lied, but it really worked. Still bothers me." But in 2006, disaster struck. McNabb tore his ACL in Week 11 against Tennessee. The Eagles were 5-5, their playoff hopes seemingly finished. Backup quarterback Jeff Garcia took over. A veteran journeyman who'd been out of football the previous year, Garcia was supposed to be a caretaker, someone to manage the collapse. Instead, he caught fire. The Eagles won their final 5 games, finishing 10-6 and claiming the NFC East title. It was a storybook season for Garcia, a second chance nobody saw coming. January 7th, 2007, Lincoln Financial Field, wild card playoffs. The Giants came in as the 6th seed, barely scraping into the playoffs at 8-8, but they weren't intimidated. Tiki Barber, in what would be the final game of his career, ran with fury, piling up 137 yards, but Brian Westbrook matched him. Westbrook was dealing with stomach cramps that sent him to the sideline repeatedly, but when he was on the field, he was unstoppable. On one play in the second quarter, he burst through the line, bounced outside, got tripped, somehow kept his balance, cut back inside at the 20, reversed direction at the 15, and sprinted to the end zone. 49 yards of pure improvisation. The Eagles led 20-10 entering the fourth quarter. Then Eli Manning found Plaxico Burress for an 11-yard touchdown strike with 5 minutes left. 20-20. The Giants had clawed back yet again. The game came down to one final drive. Westbrook, fighting through the cramps, made key runs to move the Eagles into Giants territory. Garcia found the open receivers. The clock wound down. With 3 seconds left, David Akers lined up for a 38-yard field goal. This was one day after Tony Romo's botched hold cost Dallas a playoff game against Seattle. The image of that fumbled snap was fresh in everyone's mind. Kicker, holder, long snapper. 3 separate moving parts that all had to work perfectly. Some Eagles players couldn't couldn't watch. They turned away, waiting for the crowd's reaction to tell them what happened. Holder Coy Detmer looked at Akers. "Those posts look big, don't they?" "Don't worry," Akers said. "We're going to be celebrating in a minute." The snap was perfect. The hold was perfect. The kick was perfect. Eagles 23, Giants 20. Philadelphia fans stormed the field. It was catharsis for every playoff defeat, every time New York had flexed their championship pedigree and sent the Eagles home broken. But the celebration didn't last long. The Eagles lost to New Orleans the following week. Another season ended without a championship. Another year of coming so close only to fall short. Meanwhile, the Giants kept finding ways to win when it mattered most. In 2007, they shocked the world by beating the 18-0 New England Patriots in Super Bowl 42. Eli Manning, who'd taken over as quarterback in 2004, had his legacy-defining moment, escaping pressure and heaving a prayer that David Tyree caught against his helmet. The Giants had 2 Super Bowl titles now. The Eagles had none. But the rivalry was far from settled. The 2008 season brought 3 meetings between the teams. The first 2 were brutal, physical wars. In November, the Giants edged Philadelphia 36-31 at the Link. In December, the Eagles got revenge, 20-14 at Giants Stadium. Then came January 11th, 2009, divisional playoffs, Giants Stadium. The defending Super Bowl champions hosting the 6th-seeded Eagles with everything on the line. Philadelphia destroyed them. The Eagles' defense, fueled by that Dawkins intensity, that Reggie White mentality, suffocated New York's offense. They held the Giants to just 11 points. McNabb picked apart the vaunted secondary. It wasn't close. Final score, Eagles 23, Giants 11. For Philadelphia, it was vindication. They could beat the Giants when it mattered, in their building, in the playoffs, with everything on the line. But the championship still eluded them. The frustration was mounting. Reed had been there since 1999, McNabb since 1999, Dawkins since 1996. How many more chances would they get? Eli Manning, meanwhile, was building an Iron Man streak. 210 consecutive starts from 2004 to 2017, the 3rd longest by an NFL quarterback. He never missed a game due to injury, which meant he never missed a Giants-Eagles game. Tom Coughlin and Manning had won 1 Super Bowl together. They'd win another in 2011, again beating New England. The partnership was cemented in championship gold. But ask any Giants fan what mattered almost as much as those titles, and they tell you, beating Philadelphia. Because those fans 90 miles south never shut up. December 19th, 2010, New Meadowlands Stadium, Week 15. The Giants were 9-4, in control of their playoff destiny. The Eagles were 7-6, needing a miracle. With 8 minutes left in the 4th quarter, New York led 31-10. It was over. The Giants had won. The game started as a disaster for Philadelphia. Michael Vick threw an interception on the Eagles' first possession. The Giants turned it into points, then another score, and another. By halftime, New York led 24-3. The Eagles had been outgained 222 yards to 74. It wasn't a game, it was a massacre. The 3rd quarter didn't get better. Giants quarterback Eli Manning found tight end Kevin Boss for an 8-yard touchdown. New York led 31-10 with 8 minutes and 17 seconds remaining. It was over. Giants fans started celebrating early. The stadium's public address system blared "Fly, Eagles Fly," Philadelphia's fight song, as a taunt, as mockery. The message was clear. You don't belong here. This is our house. Then something shifted. Vick, who'd been terrible in the first half, completing just 6 of 10 passes for 33 yards and an interception, suddenly looked like the Michael Vick who'd won Comeback Player of the Year. He saw the field differently, moved differently. The same quarterback who'd spent 21 months in federal prison for dogfighting, who'd lost everything and clawed his way back to respectability, wasn't going to let this game end in humiliation. With 7:28 left, Vick dropped back and fired deep. Tight end Brent Selleck caught it in stride and sprinted 65 yards to the end zone. Giants 31, Eagles 17. The crowd quieted, just slightly. But New York still led by 2 touchdowns with 7 minutes left. They were fine. The Eagles recovered an onside kick. Kicker David Akers placed it perfectly on the left side, and Riley Cooper fell on it. The Eagles had the ball at their own 43-yard line. Vick escaped pressure, scrambled to the Giants' 6-yard line. 2 incomplete passes later, facing 3rd and goal from the 4, Vick kept it himself. He ran it in. Giants 31, Eagles 24. 5 minutes and 28 seconds remaining. The Giants went 3 and out, punted it back. Vic took over with 3 minutes and 1 second left at his own 12-yard line. He scrambled for 33 yards on 3rd down, found Jason Avant, scrambled again. The 2-minute warning came with Philadelphia at the Giants' 20. On 2nd and 3 from the 13, Vic threw to Jeremy Maclin on the left side. Maclin shook cornerback Terrell Thomas's tackle and reached the end zone. 31-31, 1 minute and 16 seconds remaining. The Giants got the ball back. They ran the clock down. With 14 seconds left, they faced 4th down at their own 38-yard line. They had to punt. All they needed was to not give DeSean Jackson a chance. Rookie punter Matt Dodge lined up. His instructions from Tom Coughlin were explicit. Punt it out of bounds. Whatever you do, don't let Jackson touch the ball. The snap was high. Dodge rushed. He panicked. He drove a line drive kick straight down the middle of the field, directly at Jackson. Jackson fielded it at his own 35-yard line. He bobbled it. For a split second, it looked like he might lose it, but he secured it, took a few steps back, surveyed the field. The Giants' coverage team closed in. Jackson saw a lane. He dodged one tackler, burst through the first wave of blue jerseys, hit the sideline at full speed. Giants defenders converged, but they couldn't get an angle on him. The only person left was Dodge, the punter, who had no chance of bringing down Jackson in the open field. Jackson ran down the sideline. When he reached the goal line, he didn't immediately cross. He ran parallel to it, looking over his shoulder, making absolutely sure the clock hit 0, then stepped into the end zone. The crowd fell silent, then exploded in disbelief as Eagles players swarmed Jackson. Tom Coughlin had already lost it. Before Jackson even crossed the goal line, Coughlin threw his play sheet to the ground and sprinted onto the field, screaming at Dodge. His face was redder than usual, veins bulging, pure rage. Final score, Eagles 38, Giants 31. 4 touchdowns in the final 7 minutes and 28 seconds. 28 unanswered points in the 4th quarter, the most in Eagles history. The largest comeback from a 21-point deficit since 2003, and the first walk-off punt return touchdown in NFL history. Both teams finished the season 10-6. The Eagles won the NFC East on the head-to-head tiebreaker. The Giants missed the playoffs entirely. Sometimes you try so hard to do something, in this case kick the ball out of bounds, and you just lose your head, Dodge said afterward. That's kind of what happened. I had plenty of time. I just didn't execute. There's nothing more you can say. You can't give the most explosive returner in the game a line drive in that situation. Coughlin publicly eviscerated Dodge after the game. The Giants released him during the 2011 preseason. He never played another NFL game. His entire professional career would be defined by one catastrophic mistake. Vic finished with 130 rushing yards on 10 carries, the most ever by an Eagles quarterback, and 4 total touchdowns, 3 passing and 1 rushing. His final stat line, 21 for 35, 242 passing yards, 3 touchdown passes, 1 interception. In the first half, he'd been 6 for 10 for 33 yards and an interception. In the second half, he went 15 for 25 for 209 yards and 3 touchdowns. This was by far one of the greatest comebacks of my career, Vic said. Being down by such a huge deficit to come back in such a short period of time, by far one of the best. I believe in myself and my teammates. We were able to make plays when we needed to. Jackson understood what he'd just done. I know what I'm capable of doing, he said. My fans know. If you ask all of my fans, I think they'll tell you I'm one of the best in the game. Not to sound cocky, but I feel unstoppable. The next day, New York's tabloids were brutal. The New York Post ran a front-page headline, "Giants dog it, epic collapse against Vic and the Eagles." The photos showed Vic with 2 dogs' faces superimposed on Giants players behind him, a cruel reference to his past. The Giants had tried to humiliate Philadelphia by playing their fight song when the game felt over. Instead, they'd given the Eagles fuel for the most improbable comeback in rivalry history, the miracle at the new Meadowlands. 32 years after Herman Edwards picked up Joe Pisarcik's fumble and ran it back for a touchdown, Philadelphia had done it again, on the Giants' home field, against the same team, with the same result. Absolute, crushing heartbreak for New York. The rivalry wasn't just alive, it was more vicious than ever. The 2010s brought rebuilding phases for both teams, coaching changes, roster turnover, the usual cycle of hope and disappointment. But in 2017, something magical happened in Philadelphia. The Eagles, led by head coach Doug Peterson and second-year quarterback Carson Wentz, dominated the regular season. They won 13 games, clinched home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Everything was falling into place. Then Wentz tore his ACL in Week 13. Season over. Super Bowl dreams crushed. Except backup quarterback Nick Foles had other plans. Foles, a journeyman who'd been out of football the previous year, who'd nearly retired, who was supposed to be a placeholder, led the Eagles through the playoffs. They beat Atlanta in the divisional round, destroyed Minnesota 38-7 in the NFC Championship, and in Super Bowl 52, they faced the New England Patriots. Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, the dynasty, the same team that had beaten Philadelphia in Super Bowl 39 13 years earlier. The Eagles won 41-33. Nick Foles caught a touchdown pass on a trick play that would be forever known as the Philly Special. He threw for 373 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was named Super Bowl MVP. Philadelphia had its first Super Bowl championship in franchise history, their first league title since 1960. 57 years of waiting finally over. The city erupted. The parade drew an estimated 700,000 people. Center Jason Kelce gave a victory speech that captured everything Philadelphia football meant: the underdog mentality, the chip on the shoulder, the decades of hunger finally satisfied. Yet even with that championship secured, even with the Lombardi Trophy parade down Broad Street, the Eagles-Giants games still carried weight, because this rivalry was never about championships alone. It was about pride, about not giving an inch to the team 90 miles away, about making sure your rival remembered what happened the last time you met. January 5th, 2025, Lincoln Financial Field, Week 18. The Eagles were playoff bound, looking to close out the regular season strong. The Giants were fighting for respect in a lost season, trying to prove they still belonged in the conversation. The game unfolded as these games always do: physical, bitter, every yard contested. Philadelphia won 20-13, another Eagles victory, another chapter in a rivalry that had spanned 9 decades. Because 90 miles separates these cities, but hatred brings them together twice a year. Bednarik's hit on Gifford that became legend. The fumble that sparked the first miracle at the Meadowlands. Clyde Simmons running a blocked field goal back for a touchdown in overtime. The forgotten miracle. DeSean Jackson's walk-off punt return that crushed New York's playoff hopes. But the rivalry didn't stop there. The 2025 season brought a split that embodied everything this rivalry had always been: venue dominance and stolen moments. October 9th, 2025, MetLife Stadium. Thursday Night Football, Week 6. Playing on a short week, the Eagles traveled to New Jersey and were ambushed. The Giants, in a stunning reversal of recent trends, dominated Philadelphia 34-17. It was a rare bright spot in another difficult season for New York, and a trap game the Eagles wouldn't soon forget. Just 17 days later, the Eagles exacted revenge. October 26, 2025, Lincoln Financial Field, Week 8. The Eagles wore their alternate Kelly green uniforms, a nod to the era of Randall Cunningham and Reggie White. They improved to 5-0 all-time when wearing these throwbacks in the modern era. Jalen Hurts returned to form with 4 passing touchdowns, surgically dismantling the Giants' secondary. Saquon Barkley, in a narrative-rich performance against his former team, rushed for 150 yards, asserting his dominance and justifying his move to the division rival. Final score: Eagles 38, Giants 20. The 2025 season proved what had always been true. This rivalry wasn't defined by one-sided dominance. It was a tale of 2 venues, of stolen victories and brutal revenge. The Giants could still win at MetLife in prime time, but the Eagles would make them pay for it weeks later at the Link, re-establishing the hierarchy of the division. These moments don't fade. They become part of the regional identity. Stories told and retold, ammunition for the next battle. The fan bases still can't stand each other. Philadelphia's blue-collar intensity, where fans will boo their own players but defend them fiercely to outsiders. The city that threw snowballs at Santa Claus, that booed the 1968 draft pick of a running back nobody wanted, that cheered when Michael Irvin got injured on the field. New York's championship pedigree, where expectations run high and mediocrity isn't tolerated. The city that spawned the Mara family dynasty, that built Giants Stadium, that won 4 Super Bowls and expects to win more. The 700 level at Veterans Stadium, the Big Blue Blue Wrecking Crew, the Minister of Defense, Concrete Charlie, Lawrence Taylor, Brian Dawkins, Eli Manning, Donovan McNabb. Some rivalries are manufactured by marketing departments. Some are forced by league scheduling. This one was born from geography and nurtured by genuine contempt. This one matters because neither side can escape it. You can't drive from Philadelphia to New York without thinking about what happened the last time these teams played. You can't wear your team's colors in the other city without expecting confrontation. You can't mention one team without the other fan base finding a way to make it about them. This is the oldest rivalry in the NFC East, 92 years and counting. Eagles lead 97-90 with 2 ties. 92 years and counting. Nearly dead even after all that time, and after all these years, after all these games, after all the pain both sides have inflicted on each other, one truth remains. When these teams meet, stats don't matter. Records don't matter. Playoff implications don't matter. Only one thing matters: making sure the team 90 miles away remembers what just happened.